Okay, before I start, I'd like to have a word with whoever designed this goddamn chase scene. This was the bane of my existence because what the hell, man? Hello and welcome to this humble channel of mine. I honestly didn't know if I wanted to make these kinds of videos because I didn't know if I could put together something that could be compelling enough to watch. But you know what? I have a lot to say about this game, so this is just my excuse to yap about it. But before I begin, I think I'm going to go change to a different form that may or may not be familiar to some of you. For context, I used to have a side Twitter account called C_F_Nightmares where I posted Little Nightmares fan art pretty regularly. I honestly don't know how I managed to do that, to be honest, and this is basically the persona I made for it. So this feels right at home in terms of the topic that we're going to be talking about today. You may have seen some of my posts and funny interactions I had directly with the official Little Nightmares account when the second game had come out. And I even hosted a collaborative project with a bunch of amazing artists I called Tune the Transmission, where everyone drew Mono and Six and I arranged them into a giant collage. It's still up, so you can check it out in the link in the description. Though the current state of Twitter is in its own nightmarish hellscape, so I kinda nuked that side account without really saying anything. But if you want to check out all the fan art I made for Little Nightmares a few years ago, links will be in the description as well. Alright, enough with plugging my links and onto the topic at hand. So, I love horror as a genre, but I'm one of those people who prefers to sit back and watch someone play a horror game instead of playing it myself because I'm a big baby that gets scared easily. Also, with my reflexes, I'm probably the first one that's going to die in any horror movie. Though there are some horror games that are scarier than others in my opinion, and that's based on my preference and what I personally find scary. I think Silent Hill and Resident Evil are great horror franchises, but sometimes they feel a little too action-packed that it kind of removes any fear and danger you might have in a situation because you have a gun or some other weapon to protect yourself. The reason why I gravitate towards games like Fatal Frame and Little Nightmares is because there's so much more vulnerability. Fatal Frame's combat system is unique in that your weapon is a camera, so your aim, control, and movement is a lot more restricted, making you feel a bit more helpless. The first two Little Nightmares games, and even the spin-off mobile game, Very Little Nightmares, it feels more like a game of cat and mouse. You're a tiny child in this massive, horrific world that's turned upside down, and your greatest asset is, ironically, your size. You can tuck yourself away in boxes, slip through cracks and crevices, so even the biggest adversaries can't reach you. But what I love the most about Little Nightmares is how the game set up the world building through show, don't tell. The first games did such a good job at laying the groundwork for what the world is, how it may have fallen into such a state, and how those who still remain live in it. Crude scribbles of eyes, spirals, a tower emitting a constant and haunting signal, creatures with cone-like heads. It leaves you asking questions with most of them being left unanswered. But that's what keeps you coming back to these worlds. You crave more clues and puzzle pieces in hopes that you'll finally be able to piece together the bigger picture. And perhaps I'm in the minority here, but for a franchise like Little Nightmares, I prefer being left in the dark. I love a good mystery, and sometimes you need an answer for closure, but I don't necessarily need that for Little Nightmares. I like some things answered, but there's something more terrifying about things left unsaid because it leaves room for your imagination to take over. I remember when Little Nightmares 2 came out, I saw a lot of people say how they hoped a hypothetical third game would involve Six reconciling with Mono and ending the time loop that they're all trapped in. But I'm like, that's not the kind of world or game where that sort of thing is on the table at all, in my opinion. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with wanting that, because again, depending on the person you are, it's okay to want closure or a resolution to betrayal like that. But in my opinion, reconciliation would only take away the weight and impact of that moment. In a world like Little Nightmares, there's no such thing as second chances. And that's what makes these games so terrifying and tragic. So, how does Little Nightmares 3 fit into all this, and does it live up to those ideas? I mean, kind of. Okay, let me get my grievances out first because I don't want this video to just be me picking out everything I didn't like about the game, how much it differs from the previous ones, blah blah blah, because is it a good horror game? Yeah, I think so. But is it a great Little Nightmares game? Let's talk about it. Let's get some of the more technical gripes out of the way. The controls were really frustrating in my opinion. For context, I played this game on my Switch too. There were so many instances where controls wouldn't register, like the amount of times I'd be in front of a box to jump up to and pull myself up, or to jump up to a hole and try to grab on the ledge. My character wouldn't grab it. This was especially annoying during chase scenes because these chase scenes are designed with just enough time to let you mess up an input once before you either just barely make it or you get caught and you can try again with better foresight of when you need to do which action. But if the character is not following through with the inputs you're telling them to do, that's not an issue with the player anymore. This sucks so much with the hot air balloon escape part, which, oh my god, I would not do this sequence again even if you put a gun to my head. I think it took me over 20 tries to finally get through this part alone, and not even a quarter of these attempts did I even make it into the hot air balloon. And you wanna know why? It's because my character would either fall off the frickin' plank, or when I jump in and press the grab button onto the hot air balloon, the character wouldn't grab on. I was losing my freaking mind. I was this close to just giving up and watching a playthrough of the rest of the game, but I gave it one more shot after dinner and I managed to do it on that attempt. So, pro tip, if you're struggling with a part in any video game, try eating something because maybe you'll get a buff you didn't know you needed. I also think some of the mechanics weren't fully realized, like the fact that you only needed the umbrella for like 1/4 of the game makes it feel arbitrary. I think if you had to discard an item or mechanic due to limitations involving inventory or whatever, I think an easy way to express to the player that a mechanic isn't necessary anymore is if you tie that into the story like, oh no, during this chase scene they drop their umbrellas but they can't stop for them and they have to keep running, instead of just like, oh, I guess I don't have the umbrella anymore because it got replaced with a flashlight. That would still make sense narratively, where these small kids need to travel and get away from danger as quickly as possible, so they're gonna drop anything that's gonna slow them down. Admittedly, I had to watch Super Horror Bros video on Little Nightmares 3 because I had the pieces of everything in front of me, but I didn't know how to piece it all together, so I highly recommend watching his summary video of the game if you want clarity of the story from start to finish. So I've been avoiding pretty much everything that was being promoted about this game because these games are best enjoyed going in completely blind in my opinion. So I only just got the context that Little Nightmares takes place in a dimension called the Nowhere, and within that is the Spiral, which is where all the different settings and locations take place in. So my main gripe I have about the game is the setting, and this will tie into some questions I have about the characters themselves. The thing I really like about the previous games that contrasts with the third game is how well connected and cohesive the locations are to one another. In the first game, you start off in the bowels of the mall, where you meet the janitor, encounter the twin chefs in the kitchen, encounter the guests aboard the mall, before finally facing off against the lady in her quarters. There's a clear progression from one area to the next, giving you a sense of where you are, but also making you more aware that the threats are becoming greater. It's also a lot easier to piece together environmental storytelling when that setting takes place on a specific vessel or area, because all these bits of lore you find in the background add context to where you are. Traversing through different areas via a mirror in the third game felt a lot more disconnected and disjointed because you're not given the same opportunity to sit with the clues and hints you discover about the area you're in, because when you eventually move on to a different area, it's hard to connect what you just learned about the area you were just in with the one you're in now, and it makes the things you learned feel kind of aimless. And it doesn't help the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of lore scattered or about to begin with. A lot of rooms and areas felt pretty empty aside from debris, pipes, and other background elements that were just there to fill out the room. Hell, I think Very Little Nightmares had way more lore and environmental storytelling, and one specific room from that game that still haunts me to this day is this one. Are these gnomes looking at the photos of their former selves, or are they mourning the characters that they once knew? It's cheesy to say, but you need these moments that speak 1,000 words for a franchise that doesn't have many words to begin with. I don't want to just find my way out of the place I'm in. I also want to explore and piece together the story behind it. It's a lot easier to just forget the places we've been to in Little Nightmares 3 because they're not linked in any way, and it's not like you have to worry about the monster baby in the candy factory. You see what I'm trying to get at here? Yes, you need a moment of reprieve after going through each ordeal, but I feel like each enemy in the previous games has lingered with me a bit longer even after killing them or escaping, whereas with Little Nightmares 3, I got over them pretty quickly once I went through the mirror into another location. And speaking more on the locations themselves, I think the Necropolis and the Carnival? I'm just gonna call it Carnival. I think those two areas are the weakest areas in my opinion, more so Necropolis because it's the place that sticks out like a sore thumb the most. It's also the least scary area because there are moments where the place is like well lit like daytime, and even when it gets dark, it still felt pretty open, so there was never a moment where I felt trapped. I am curious about it though, because it seems like Necropolis is some desolate ancient civilization that's been terrorized by the monster baby, which instills me anything but fear and just makes me giggle every time I think or say it. The Candy Factory definitely stepped up in the creepy department, but then it sort of lost me because it kind of felt too similar to the hospital from the second game, and it didn't help the fact that the supervisor also shared similar characteristics to the doctor. I'm gonna be honest and say that the supervisor, even though I hate spiders, was not scary to me. The thing that I found absolutely terrifying about the enemies in the previous games is how grotesque, but still hauntingly human they still looked. It's the uncanny valley that makes things a lot scarier in my opinion than if they were just part creature or animal. The supervisor is just a creepy spider lady. Okay, cool. We had that before in Little Nightmares 2 with the doctor, except he was scarier in my opinion because he still looked human for the most part, but the fact that he's crawling up ceilings and walls like a spider, it's a lot more unfathomable. When you can't comprehend how and why a character can do something, that's scarier. Killing the supervisor was satisfying though. And then we have the carnival, which... okay, the first half of it was kind of underwhelming because it felt like you were just sightseeing, and then there was maybe a thread or two with the puppets. I mean, it was kind of nice just to take in the sights of this messed up carnival, and even playing some games or two, but I'm not playing this game to awe at flashing lights and spectacles. I'm here to feel dread, and feel like I'm gonna get killed in the next room. Thankfully, they did deliver with the introduction of the puppet master and his puppet. What's that? Oh, that's not what they're called? The Kin and Minikin. Ha. Interesting names, but sure. Finally, an enemy that's actually terrifying. There's just something about something crawling really freaking fast at you that makes me shit my pants. I think it's because the original Exorcist movie has traumatized a whole generation to anything that crawls. If you know, you know. I think they were the most memorable main enemy in the whole game because you're dealing with two threats with very different characteristics. It's not like the twin chefs from the first game where you're dealing with two enemies that function the same, but having an enemy both big and small that can virtually cover each other's weaknesses is frankly terrifying. I will say, the experience of burning that little fucker to a crisp was just as satisfying had I gotten it the first time. Good fucking riddance. Although I wish we could have killed the kin too, because the moment he killed that gnome, I was seeing red, like how fucking dare you. Ugh, I want to cry when that happened, I was genuinely distraught. And finally we have the Institute. So I have mixed feelings about this location, but I would say they're more on the positive side, which I'll go over in a bit. I don't have many negative things to say about this area aside from the usual clunky controls, like, damn, am I really bad at this game? The final fight against the hypnotist felt kind of weird design-wise, mainly because sometimes it was hard to know where to go to avoid falling debris, but it was pretty straightforward, and being the one to do the final hits on both hands and the hypnotist's eye felt really satisfying. I don't know if I found him scary per se. If anything, I found myself in awe watching his limbs slither through the walls and stuff. And I think given we've already seen big hands because of the monster baby, his hands and overall reach didn't really scare me much. Now to tie in the characters and the story with all that being said, Lo and Alone traverse through these different areas via mirrors that Lo can somehow manifest into portals with the sole purpose of eventually finding a mirror that leads to home. The question I have is how Lo got that power in the first place, and how did he know how to use them in the first place? Because with Mono, for example, we slowly learn that he's able to control and tune the transmission of TVs to the point where he can then teleport through TV sets. And by the end, we learn that he turns into the Thin Man, the one in charge and occupying the signal tower, so those powers are present in both past, Mono, and his future self, Thin Man, because they're contained in a time loop. We've seen and heard so many kids trapped in the nowhere, but why is it that only some kids get special powers but others don't? How do these powers manifest? There's something about Lo having these powers and having this hope that he'll find a way back home that I find really interesting, because if you think about the objective of the previous games, there wasn't a clear goal of finding a way home. Because with the limited knowledge we had at the time, we assumed that the world of Little Nightmares was the real world that had fallen into disarray. At least that's what I thought. But with the context that these kids are trapped in the spiral and in a dimension known as the Nowhere, it has me constantly wondering how many even realize that they're in another place and that there is a way out at all. We may not know how and why certain kids gain powers that they have, but there's something else to consider. The fact that Lo was able to manifest alone, an imaginary friend he made from a doll he keeps close to him, into someone who was almost real in the Nowhere, that feels like a different kind of power all on its own. I picked up on the fact that Alone wasn't real when we see Lo holding a doll of her in one of the flashbacks, so it genuinely broke my heart when at the end they both go through that final mirror together, and for a split second you think that everything is going to be okay for once, but it wouldn't be a Little Nightmares game without some good old angst. And then, Alone ends up back in the Institute before disappearing, leaving only her clothes behind, which clearly implies that without Lo, she doesn't have a physical form or existence to begin with. But it does strike a similar scene to the second game where throughout the Pale City, you stumble across a bunch of clothes left behind as if people had vanished. After the credits, we see Lo back in what looks like the real world, given that everything is now scaled properly, looking down at these shards of glass and trying to see if he can piece the mirror back together so he can go back to save Alone. But Lo is alone. It's nice to have a somewhat bittersweet ending for once that's not just an outright bummer, but still fits right in with the franchise in my opinion. Even though the game was lacking the scare department, at least for me, I still found a lot of enjoyment in the emotional beats of Lo and Alone lifting each other up and comforting each other, because it's easier to feel attached to these characters who are young and don't deserve to go through the horrors that they're in. If there's something that Little Nightmares has always done right in my opinion, is make you feel for these poor souls. Circling back to what I alluded in the Institute section, I personally really like how the Sounds of Nightmares ties into this section specifically. For context, Sounds of Nightmares is basically an audiobook drama that was produced a few years ago, and there was even a contest for it where the winner got to have their entry featured in an episode. Though at the time of the contest, the Sounds of Nightmares wasn't formally announced yet, so the contest was kind of vague in outlining what one of the prizes were. I think it was something along the lines of your entry will be used in an audio experience for Little Nightmares. It's very well produced, everything from the ambience, the sounds, the voice acting. It's extremely immersive and I highly recommend anyone to give it a listen, especially since sound plays a huge role in Little Nightmares as a whole. I will go into spoilers for the Sounds of Nightmares, so if you don't want to be spoiled, skip to the time code you see on screen. So it's pretty clear, or at least heavily implied, that the Institute in the Nowhere is the same as the county's psychiatric institute from the Sounds of Nightmares. To summarize, each episode of the Sounds of Nightmares involves Otto, a counselor at the Institute, tending to a patient known as Noon, as she recounts her experiences in the Nowhere. What starts off as curiosity from Otto's perspective in regards to the Nowhere, it escalates into an obsession that he callously puts Noon's life and well-being at risk, because the more he learns about the Nowhere, the more he comes face to face with the possibility that his little sister, Cece, who went missing many years ago, could be tied to the Nowhere. The Institute in the Nowhere mirrors actual rooms that exist in the County Psychiatric Institute, like specifically Noon's padded cell where we see x-rays of the tumor in her brain and other objects that were mentioned in the Sounds of Nightmares. This game does make some effort into bringing other source material within the Little Nightmares world to life in other ways, and it does feel rewarding to those fans who've engaged with all the Little Nightmares content that's out there, because they're going to be the ones who will experience that aha moment when it matters. I know there are going to be some people who will disagree with me on that, because given how expensive gaming and the like can be nowadays, it's asking a lot of players to spend extra money and time on supplementary material like the audio experience, books, comics, because not everyone is going to be a fan of consuming content in those ways. I can speak on that personally because I'm not the biggest reader, and seeing how there's a novel and upcoming comic for Little Nightmares, it's a bit overwhelming to be honest. I know there's no rush or pressure to engage with everything all at once, but I can only imagine how frustrating it might be to play something and not realize that you're missing out on some big lore implications that you don't know about because you haven't consumed certain content outside of the gaming medium. I said this section was mainly going to focus on the things I enjoyed and liked about Little Nightmares 3, but I just thought I'd put that out there so people know that, ultimately these are my opinions and you're allowed to disagree and feel however you feel in contrast. Anyway, back to some of the other things I enjoyed about the game. The one mechanic that I really enjoyed that I wish I could have been fleshed out more was the time-traveling doll. I don't know what else to call it. It was kind of gimmicky, but being able to see what the world looked like before it became abandoned and dilapidated, it makes you want to see more of what the other locations looked like through that lens. Instead of the hulking guests in the carnival area, where we see glimpses of families and patrons enjoying the carnival games and rides, instead of the crumbling ancient civilization, where we see more of the everyday life of those who call this desert home, it adds so many interesting ideas and questions of what life was like before. Being able to get a glimpse of what little humanity remained in this tiny pocket of the past, it made me emotional. How long did it take for these once inhabited walls to decay and rot? Seeing the children apparitions and hearing the distorted laughter is a haunting reminder of what's left. This entry to Little Nightmares may not be as strong as its predecessors, but I still feel a lot of things for it. I'm sad that in the end, Lo lost his best friend. I'm sad for all the children that are trapped and or have fallen victim to the Nowhere's clutches. It's kind of funny. I think the fact that this entry is far from perfect, to me, reflects what the Nowhere is. It's a world of horror, awe, and unpredictability. You don't know what you're gonna get, even if you're left feeling disappointed. I think now that I've had time to sit with the game and cool off from the more frustrating parts of the game, I definitely appreciate the game more for what it is, and I'm not lamenting as much as on what I wish it was. That's how I consume a lot of media. Even if I have issues with the game, anime, or whatever, I always try to critique it in what it's trying to be rather than what it isn't. I'm not going to be mad or dislike Little Nightmares 3 because it wasn't developed by Tarsier Studios, because then I would be going into it expecting a Tarsier Studios experience that I know it was never going to be. To give credit where credit is due, it's going to be really hard to live up to what the original studio achieved, and I don't envy the shoes that Supermassive had to fill. I did see some people mention how Tarsier Studios gave Supermassive a blueprint of what they wanted Little Nightmares to be. Please correct me if I'm wrong, that's just what I've heard from word of mouth. Therefore, Tarsier Studios has some responsibility in how Little Nightmares 3 turned out, but in my opinion, I don't really agree with that sentiment. A blueprint is just a very basic outline, but you still have to flesh it out. When you have an outline for an essay, for example, you still have to write the essay. You can have a really strong outline with all these good ideas and themes, but you can still end up with a lackluster execution. I mean, how many times have you seen concept art for something and thought to yourself, man, I wish they went with this concept instead of what ended up in the final? There's no doubt in my mind that if Tarsier Studios were the ones to make Little Nightmares 3, it would have turned out differently. And I don't say that to insult or jab at Supermassive's capabilities, but that we kind of have to come to terms with the fact that Supermassive are not Tarsier Studios, no matter how much we want another Little Nightmares game developed by Tarsier Studios again. They're both great studios in their own right, but they don't share the same brain. You don't have to be happy about it, you definitely don't have to like it. You're allowed to fight for this franchise because you want to believe it's better than this. But sometimes it's okay to let something you once loved go and cherish your time and memories of what it once was. I'm going to end this video with me passing on some nugget of wisdom as someone who's been in fandoms and on the internet in general for 15 years or so. You're allowed to love something despite all its flaws, and you're allowed to hate something because of those flaws. But here's the thing, depending on which side you're on, the sooner you stop trying to persuade people to come to your side, and in general, stop caring about what opposing views someone may have, the more you're going to enjoy engaging in a fandom and the source material. It's normal to feel affected, impacted by someone else's opinion over something you love or hate, because everyone wants to feel like their opinion matters. This is especially true if your favorite creator or YouTuber shares or disagrees with how you feel, because you hold their opinion in higher regard. We all want to feel validated and seen, and that's normal. However, and this might be a hard pill to swallow, you don't need approval from anyone to validate how you feel about something. You're not wrong for feeling the way you do, but you also don't need to feel like you have the right opinion either. Being on the internet and fandoms is not one big friendship party where we hold hands and sing kumbaya, and the sooner you stop trying to make people feel the way you do, the easier it will be to focus on finding your space of like-minded people. Sometimes you just have to agree to disagree and leave it at that. So much drama and petty arguments are born from people unwilling to give up their side of the fight that didn't need to happen to begin with. Whether you love or hate Little Nightmares 3, however you feel does not hold more or less power over how another person feels about it. That includes the creators you look up to, because at the end of the day, they're just a person like you and me. If you're going to follow and play Reanimal for that Tarsier Studios touch that you've been missing, I genuinely hope that you enjoy the game and it lives up to what you wanted Little Nightmares 3 to be. If you're going to stick around to see what's next for Little Nightmares from here on out, I hope you have fun as well. As for me, I'm going to sit back and enjoy these two cakes, and anyone is welcome to join me. Thanks for watching! Oh, actually, before I go, a few years ago, I drew this fan art of all the kids from the comics and the main games together, and I've added Lo, Alone, and Noon as well. So if you'd like to see this as your desktop wallpaper, you can find the full art on my Tumblr or Blue Sky. Okay, bye for real. Bye!